let's take a look at just a minute at learning and history, and what we're going to do is explore questions of epistemology. And epistemology is just a big word for what is knowledge and how do we come to know. So what is knowledge and how do we come to know? And this is outlined really in good detail in chapter 1 of your text. So, what is knowledge? That's one of the first questions we have to answer. What is it that's out there? What is it that's worth knowing? Where does it come from? And then how do we explain knowledge? And those are really the questions of epistemology. So knowledge can come from there's three different really sources of knowledge. So let's first look at sources of knowledge. And the three sources of knowledge are empiricism, nativism, and rationalism. Empiricism, nativism, and rationalism. All right? And empiricism is the belief that sensory experience is the only valid source of knowledge. So we only can know because we have experienced it. If we haven't experienced it, then it's not a valid source. We learn our knowledge is only through experience. All right? Nativism suggests that some knowledge is innate or is present at birth. Some is present at birth. So we do know some things at birth according to this perspective. And rationalism suggests that reason is the source of knowledge. Okay, we can come to know things through just reasoning through it and coming to some logical conclusions. So you see the differences? We can only learn, the only valid source of knowledge is our experiences. No. Some things are present at birth, or we don't have to experience it or have it present at birth. We can reason through things to come up with knowledge. Those are three different perspectives on the sources of knowledge when we talk about epistemology. Another question that epistemology asks, or another thing that epistemology examines, I should say, is what is the content of knowledge? And there's four different sort of perspectives on the content of knowledge. There's the Skepticism Approach. C-I-S-M. Skepticism, which suggests that the world may not be knowable at all. In other words, we can try to know, but we will never really understand reality. Never really understand reality. No matter how much we try, we can't know it. We can't know what's really out there. We're always going to be influenced by our experiences, by our biases, and so on and so forth. Okay? Realism suggests that all things in the world can be known. Realism. If we work hard enough, we can know all things. We can know. A third belief of the content of knowledge is idealism. And idealism says we really can't know reality. All we can know are our ideas or representations about reality. Okay? So we can't know reality. Only ideas and representations of reality. So we'll never know what's really out there. We just know how we believe in it or how we represent it. Okay, that's the idealist approach. And the pragmatic approach suggests that there is knowledge, it's out there, but we have an imperfect representation about it. Sometimes what we think is, sometimes what we know does correspond to reality, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay? There is a reality, and sometimes our representation is accurate and sometimes not. Some representation's accurate, some are not. Alright? Okay. So, epistemology is looking at three different things. 1, the source of knowledge. 2, the content of knowledge. Alright? And 3, what are the knowledge traditions? What are the traditions that sort of govern these sources and content? And we need a new screen, so let's get a new screen here. All right, let's look at epistemology. Last part of epistemology here. Got a new screen. And the third element of epistemology is knowledge traditions. What are the knowledge traditions? How do we theoretically talk about this source and content of knowledge? This is our third element of epistemology. And we have what's called pragmatism, objectivism, and interpretivism. Sorry, can't say that one today. Pragmatism, objectivism, interpretivism. All right, pragmatism is the orientation that corresponds with the belief we described earlier about the content of knowledge, that there is a reality, but we can't know it directly. Oops, reality exists, but we can't directly know it. So some of our beliefs will correspond to reality and some will not. Some beliefs correspond to reality and some do not. Okay, so there is a reality and we believe certain things, but some of the things we believe are accurate in their reflection of reality and other things are not accurate. Our second epistemological tradition is Objectivism, which suggests that reality exists and is separate from the knower. So there are things that are real and we can come to know them. And we come to know through empiricism. If we experience it, then we can know it. And we also then would have we'd have a realism approach as well, tied up in our objectivism, because we would believe that everything in the world can be known. All right. Now, our third epistemological tradition is Interpretivism, which suggests that reality is constructed by the knower. So it's whatever we make of it is what reality is. I'll give you an example of all of this in a minute. And rationalism and idealism characterize this approach. Rationalism So let's look at this for just a second and see that see how we look at these three different things. Let's see if we can come up with an example of these. All right. So objectivism. Let's look at the tree falling in the forest, right? Remember that little question people ask, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a noise? Objectivism would say yes. It makes a noise because when one solid object hits another solid object, it makes a noise. If we're not operating in a vacuum. And in our atmosphere, we don't have a vacuum. So yes, that tree fell, and yes, it did make a noise. Okay? The pragmatists say that knowledge can't be known directly, and so we have to sort of interpret it, and they would say, well, yes, if you believe that that tree made a noise based on your understanding of the atmosphere and based on the way things work, then, you know, sure, maybe it did make a noise, and you're probably right. You've logically argued through that. The objectivist would say it made a noise no matter what. The pragmatist would say, well, sure, it made a noise. It has to have made a noise because when one solid object hits another one, it makes a noise. That's the rationale I used here. I sort of used a pragmatist approach to explain what's really the reality of the objective approach. It's probably confusing, isn't it? The interpretivists would say, we don't know. Depends on what you think. Do you believe the tree made a noise when it hit the ground? or do you believe it didn't? And it can be open to whichever one you want because you constructed. And if you want to say, no, it didn't make a noise if no one was around to hear it, because noise is not the process of one object hitting another object. It's the sound waves that emanate and someone taking them in. And you have to take it in for it to truly be a noise. And if someone else wants to say, no, 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 noise is the generation of the sound waves, regardless of if anybody takes them in, then interpretivism would say both of those arguments are equally valid because you, the knower, constructed them. And so they're valid for you. Okay? All right. So those are the three knowledge traditions of epistemology. Let's move on.